Welcome back to Tutorial Tidbits. I'm Elizabeth St. Hilaire, and this week I'm going to switch gears on you and do a little watercolor sketching demonstration. Actually, next year in Italy, I am going to be teaching Bella Botanicals, which is going to be a watercolor sketching retreat in Tuscany. What could be better? So I'm working on my watercolor sketching, and I decided that I would share a flower with you. And if this is something that you're interested in, stay tuned because I think I'm going to be doing more of it between now and next trip to Tuscany. So if you've got a minute, let's check it out. Welcome back. Today I'm going to do a quick watercolor sketch tutorial. This is something that I'll be exploring in more depth on my Patreon page. That link is going to be below. Also, the supplies that I'm using for this are all on my Amazon shopping resource page, and that link is going to be below. So what I'm using is a fine point Faber-Castell black Pitt pen that's permanent and waterproof, a mechanical pencil, a kneaded rubber eraser, and my Sakura Koi watercolor pocket field sketch box. So it's a very small, compact set of watercolors, and my water brush. So I've got this mum that I got in a bouquet from Trader Joe's. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is really look closely at my flower and render it as accurately as I can with the mechanical pencil. I like the mechanical pencil because I don't have to sharpen it. So if I'm on the go, I don't need a pencil sharpener. I can just extend the tip. So I'm focusing on the center of this flower where the petals are all packed in tight. What they look like when they're coming straight at me, and what they look like when they're curving up, and what they look like when they're then heading out. So they have short curved ones and small ones on the center, and then they're going to start to get longer. And I don't feel like I have to draw every petal, but I do want to capture the essence of the shape of this mum. So I'm noticing that they're curving towards me. There's a lot of petals overlapping here. I'm going to draw my impression of the majority of them, and then I'm going to paint in with a wash to suggest that there's more petals than I drew. Once I get the majority of the petals in and the gist of the flower, I'm going to come back in with the pen, maybe add some more petals, but definitely reinforce the ones that I drew. So I'm going to draw the ones in the front first so that their openings are not overlapped with the petals behind them. So it's important to draw the stuff that's in the front first. I'm still going to be looking at my flower to make sure that my drawing is accurate, that my shapes were accurate with the pencil. And if I can improve upon that while I'm inking the drawing, I will. I'm trying to achieve a sense of overlapping. As these petals are all really clustered close together, but I'm drawing the front first. So there's no lines of intersection. Now that I've got the sketch drawn in, I'm going to move my flower so I can draw some of the stem. And I'm just going to freehand that with the pen. So now that I've got the sketch drawn in, I'm going to come back in with my kneaded rubber eraser and gently and lightly remove all the pencil marks. Then I'm going to take the water brush, which is filled, the barrel is filled with water, and I'm going to start with a glaze, a very light glaze of watered down yellow right onto my dry paper, starting in the center where the petals are most dark and congested, but not filling in everything, leaving some white areas always, even in the shadows. I'm leaving some white areas to be the sparkle that gives this sketch some glimmer and some life. And so I'm not super accurately painting in every petal. I'm sort of following along loosely, and then I'm also going to introduce some petals that I didn't actually draw to fill out the flower a bit more and give it some light petals that are sort of filling it out but are secondary in importance. Now, while this dries, I'm going to lay a green very lightly into the stem and the leaves. Again, I'm leaving white and going with a light hand. Now, while the stem dries, the flower, the nice thing about watercolor is it dries very quickly. So the flower where I started is pretty dry already. So now I'm going to come back with a slightly darker yellow and do a second layer over where I want it to be darker. And this is where the glazing happens. The watercolor blends like layers of stained glass stacked up. Not only does every layer make it darker, but you can also change colors by going over with another color. So if you put yellow, and we'll let that dry, and we glaze it over with some blue where they meet, where they cross, you'll get green, because the blue is translucent, the yellow watercolor is translucent, and as they blend like layers of stacked stained glass, you'll get a color blend on the page, which is kind of neat. So right now we're using the same color, but we're glazing a layer so that we're getting a darker yellow. So I'm going in where it would be darker than my light yellow that I've blocked out there, and I'm going in and I'm duplicating, I'm putting a second layer to make that darker. So I'm looking at the darker areas. Even in the darker areas though, I'm still going to leave some white showing through. I don't want it to be all paint, because the white is what gives it the sparkle. It's tricky to learn how to leave enough white. You either in the beginning leave too much or you get rid of it altogether, and it's just a matter of practice and going slowly and not filling it all in and sort of reminding yourself that you need to leave those whites. So I'm going to darken some of these out here, but out on the tips it's much lighter because it's catching the light. So I'm going to leave it that light airy yellow. And now I've done another layer of yellow in the areas where it would be dense and darker. So I am going to get rid of a bit of the white right down there in the center, but I'm still leaving some white. So while that glaze dries, I can come back to my leaves, which are already dry. And I'm mixing up a green blue. A little bit of blue, a little bit of green. Bring a little brown in there to neutralize that turquoise. And now I'm gonna go over where I want this to multiply and be darker. Now I'm going to come back to the flower again. I'm going to add a little bit of a brown, a golden brownish to my yellow, so I can darken down even more. It's still a bit wet in there, so it's not going to really give me a good glaze when it's still wet. It has to be totally dry. So it's because I put it on pretty thick in there. So let's come back to the stem, which was less thick, and let's glaze a little yellow over that green, and it's going to multiply and change it to a more yellow green. See how it's changing it? It's multiplying the green that's on there with the yellow that we're laying over top, and we're getting more of a yellow green and less of a blue green because we're doing the yellow glaze. Now we may be lighter in the center here and ready for another layer of a bit darker yellow. And that's really, that darkish brownish is really only going to go right here in the dense center of the flower. I don't want to bring that out too far. And it's multiplying with the yellow. Now I'm going to come back with the same yellow that I laid down, lay it over itself in some areas, and the two yellows blend together to make a darker version of the light yellow. So just like stained glass would blend if you stacked it together, here we're taking the same yellow on top of itself and darkening down where the two layers of glaze overlay. So some of these extra petals that I painted out here, I could darken the tips of those by adding this layer of glaze again. And I'm going to come back and add my same green glaze over itself again to get some darker shadows in the green stem. So the same color over itself multiplies in glazing and makes it darker, or you can go over it with a different color and they will blend and make blended color right on the paper. In our example of that, right here, I'm now going to take a blue, bright blue, and where it overlaps this yellow, it's going to make green. So there is the light blue, the light yellow, and where they overlap, they blend together to form green. So you can make blends of colors through glazes right on the paper. But the key is that the bottom layer has to be dry before you go over with the second glaze. So you have to have some patience and you have to wait for it to dry. But luckily, you don't have to wait too long because watercolor dries pretty quickly. So I'm going to continue going on in here and adding some more glazes to give some more depth. And that is the beginning of my watercolor sketch. So if you are interested in more in-depth tutorials such as this one, pop on over to my Patreon page, where a $25 a month subscription is going to get you full-length tutorial videos on a lot of different mediums, including collage, underpainting, watercolor, finishing, varnishing, hanging wires, question and answer, PDF downloads, all kinds of good stuff for learning. And I hope you will check it out, and happy Friday, and thank you for being here.